Hi, and welcome to Staying Engaged. This is a space for social media wellness tools, and our live version was for community, but hopefully it reminds you that even though being online can feel isolating, there are other people on the opposite side of your screen, many of which care similarly about the world around them. This screen right now was just some journal prompts that got people into the right headspace for this moment, especially that last one, or scroll as much as you possibly can until we start our time together. So if you want to get into that headspace, you can go ahead and put on a timer for 15 minutes or less and pause and then jump back in. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and get things started. So this was the outline, and I don't know if y'all have seen these videos, but basically with our attention spans being what they are, some content now puts a video like this up against a different video to keep people's attention. And so this is our outline. This is the same presentation I gave last night. I think I added 1 or 2 slides to it, but I didn't remove any slides. So if we don't go over something, it's because it was more about people being involved in the live version. For instance, agreements for participation. Also introductions, I'll introduce myself. Then I do have a grounding practice for all of us. And I'll go over what the algorithm does and why it does it and how it does it and what it does to us. And then instead of sharing, I got one question from folks who couldn't attend live. And so I'll see how I can bring up stuff that has kind of been relevant right now and bring it all together for us. And then if you need a 5-minute break, take one. And then at the end, some time for goals and objective setting, or just a plan to switch or change up or nudge your relationship with social media. It all depends on what you need. And also in this moment, I wanted to remind folks that all of our social media feeds are unique to us. They are individualized. So if there's anything in this presentation or elsewhere that you're like, I don't really see that, I don't know what you're talking about, it could be because your algorithm is just different than mine. Yeah. And not only is the algorithm different, our contexts are so different that when we do go to the screen, the stuff outside of the screen really informs how we understand what's in the screen. Okay, community agreements. Everyone was lovely at the live version. I really appreciate everyone who was able to show up. And this is me. Howdy. My name is Charlotte or Chuck. Either one works. My pronouns are she, her. Yep, that's about me. I mean, I'm a millennial, so I've been online for many different iterations of the internet and social media. And my previous career was in social media management. I did that for like at least a decade. And so I have not only had to know what the algorithm does, I've had to play its game. And I've had to stay plugged in during political moments where I didn't necessarily want to be plugged in. And so I had to learn how to stay grounded and stay hopeful and stay informed all at the same time. And so I put this together tonight, or, I put this together to combine that experience with my current therapeutic skills, because I feel like it's really needed right now. Social media is a decent place to be informed. We do need to fact check ourselves on it sometimes, most of the time, if not consistently. And then for our intros, we shared favorite meme or TikTok sound or platform, and I'm still gonna do that, even though no one knew what I was talking about. But that shows that the internet is so individualized at this point, which can be exciting and expansive, and it can also be distressing. Like, I'm seeing some parts of the world that are totally different than what other people are seeing. So just keeping that in mind, especially as we engage and interact with other people online. But my favorite TikTok sound right now is actually peanut butter jelly the long way. And it's just someone made a peanut butter and jelly where the crusts, like the peanut butter and the jelly was in between the crusts, and it was like standing up straight. And then and then my algorithm just kept giving me a bunch of silly videos like that. I just think it's so silly, so human, so fun. Alrighty. So first we're gonna do a grounding exercise. Please grab your phone. I know that might sound counterintuitive in this space, but go ahead and get your phone out. If you're tuning in on your phone, my suggestion would be finding another piece of technology like your computer or an iPad or tablet, something. And then get it in front of you, and then we're gonna close our eyes. Take 3 deep breaths. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Last one, inhale and exhale. In a little bit, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes. When you do, try to look at your phone or piece of technology as if you've never seen anything like it before. Go ahead. Are there any new details you haven't noticed? The screen lights up. What's your reaction to that? Shocking, confusing? What are the words on the screen? What do those icons mean? Maybe you start pressing buttons or switches to see what happens. What are the differences between you and your phone? What are the differences between you and your piece of technology? What are the similarities? What are all those icons trying to convey to you? As we wrap up this exploration of these items that we probably interact with every day, just kind of bring yourself back into the moment. I really wanted to do this grounding exercise because, one, like I said, we interact with these pieces of tech almost all day long, some of us, and they're so close to us that sometimes we kind of forget that they're not actually part of us. And another aspect of that is I've noticed that we use some like technology metaphors to refer to humans, like I need a reboot or whatever. And just stuff like that, I think like gets us in this headspace that we should respond as quickly and as efficiently and as similarly as our tech does. The best metaphor I have for that is when I wake up in the morning, I can't I can't do math at any time of day really, but especially like first thing in the morning or right before I go to sleep, I can't do math. But my phone can. You know what I mean? And so, for instance, we could have the same experience every day and we could have a different reaction to it every day. Our phone, if we press that same button, unless it's breaking apart, it's going to have the same response every single time. And so just giving us that space to be like, this tech is always in front of me, but it's not part of me because sometimes it feels that way. All right. Okay, so algorithmic impacts. First and foremost, we don't pay for most social media apps, right? They're all free. And they're free because of advertising. It's the reason these apps exist. And not only do advertisers make money from our attention online? The apps themselves sell so much of our data to the advertisers to so that they can sell ads to us. And so, yeah, the algorithm on every app is designed to keep us on that platform for as long as possible because it makes more money and more data for everyone, except for us. And I learned about that a lot. My undergrad is also in advertising, and so we learned a lot about advertising data, and especially with social media. And I remember in class one time asking like, hey, like I'm not comfortable with this. I don't know how I feel about this. Isn't this kind of unethical? And it was in my ethics and law class for advertising. And my teacher was just kind of like, well, you have to get used to it if you want to be in this industry. And obviously I'm no longer in the advertising industry. So that there's that. But also attention is a finite resource. So yes, we might be watching a movie and scrolling on our phone at the same time, but we're not perfectly paying attention to both of those things. And we can't pay attention to an infinite amount of things at one time. And so really, like when we're on there scrolling, they're aware, like advertisers and platforms are aware that attention is a finite resource, and they are doing so much with their software and advertisers themselves to find ways to engage and interact with people that keep us on there and keep our attention for as long as possible, because it's good business for them. And so for me too, sometimes when I am getting very worked up about social media, just telling myself like, hey, I'm making these people money and I don't want to be making them money right now. And that is enough motivation for me to get off of my phone sometimes. Okay. And also when we want to log off, but we can't seem to do it, yeah, we can remember that our attention is our resource to be giving out. And like I said, it's not always the motivation that's going to get us to do what we want to do, but it's one tool out of hopefully many that I'm going to share with you. And so how do advertisers keep us locked in? First of all, before we get to dopamine loops and rage bait, I believe there was a story like a few years ago about how Facebook or Instagram does their notifications. And now I'm no longer in the advertising world, so I haven't stayed up to date on algorithm like practices and whatnot. But I remember it was like they cluster your notifications so that way you're more likely to open them and look at them and like get on the app. Like they time them as if like they know when you've closed out the app, and so they time them so it's like, hey, get back on this app. Anyway, so dopamine loops and rage bait. No, these are not scientific terms, but there are plenty of studies about what social media is doing to our brains. So when we're scrolling, hormones are being released in reaction to the stimulus on the screen. That can be really, really easy to forget because it's like scrolling is such a small task. Like it's so small. Like our legs don't have to be moving. All that has to be moving is like one of our fingers for the most part. And so it's really, since it's such a small, like real world task, it is kind of hard for us to remember like there's a lot going on in this process, even though it's just our finger that's moving. And so basically dopamine gets released when we have good interactions on the internet. And there's even studies that show that it's a very similar process in our brains to like similar to having a nice social interaction in person. However, in person, the space between these dopamine releasing interactions is farther and farther apart, right? So you might have a nice exchange with the cashier, but you don't have a good exchange until you get home from the grocery store. And so that could be like 20 minutes in between. But on social media, it could be 2 seconds. And not only that, and this, like the hormone release, it creates this cycle because it is so fast. And so it's kind of like retraining our brains to want more and more and more of it. But not only is dopamine being released, but other hormones are being released as well. Could be cortisol, could be adrenaline sometimes. And these, because of the nature of social media and how fast it is, these same hormones can create similar loops. Yeah. And we have reactions to social media interactions, and these influence, our hormones. And it's very easy to forget in the contained activity of scrolling. And all of this actually changes how it feels, not only to be on our phones, but also how we are off of our phones. So since there's just so much engagement and stimulation, when we do want to get off of our phones, we can really feel that itch to get right back on, because our brain is so used to being stimulated in that way and having this like consistent feedback and this consistent release of hormones. And what is rage bait? How does rage bait play into all of this? So there's also a lot of studies about what kind of content gets engagement. And engagement is likes, shares, bookmarks, and comments. And comments is really important because rage bait is often, it's a type of content often designed to get people angry and to get people fighting with each other in the comments or replies. And this is done for many reasons. One, like I said, engagement goes up, and then this person now or this company now has these stats, like, hey, look at how good we are at all of this. Look at how many followers and fans, and look how we can get people engaged. Look how we can get people to stay on their phones, on social media. And so that can be leveraged either to sell things. Some people even, build up their audience, and then they sell their account. They sell their account because they have such great stats that they sell it off to someone else. Yeah, that gets pretty. There's a lot of social media practices going on. But some creators, they don't really care how their content makes you feel. They just want they want the stats. They want you engaged. They want your eyeballs, but it can still have a negative impact on your emotions. And not everyone is doing rage bait though. So even content that gets people to react that in a similar way might not be intentional, because rage bait is it's seen as something that's intentional. But this could also look like, I guess I'll call it like activating content. So it could look like those videos where it looks like they're just sharing the news, but the background music is very dramatic and the lighting is weird, and they end with a point that feels really dizzying and full of fear, almost like a conspiracy theory, instead of like just straightforward news and ending with like call to action or like, look at this organization helping out. And someone mentioned too, like those AI voice videos with the music in the background too, like those are designed to keep us hooked in. And something we'll get to later about nudging our algorithms is I forgot about those AI videos because my algorithm doesn't give them to me anymore. If I see anything closely related to AI, or I see anything that is, I can tell in the first few seconds is like trying to hook me in with fear and anger and despair, I scroll past it. I'm like, I can get that information elsewhere in a less activating way. And so that's one way to think about it, is there is content out there that's not, whose purpose isn't to overwhelm you or to make you stay online. Some creators their content is to get you offline and into your community to help out. So being on the lookout for things that meet those needs for you and things that definitely don't meet that need for you. So yeah. And like I said, not everything is rage bait, but the effectiveness of this tactic can give us insight into how the algorithm works, generally speaking. which reminds me of especially when things shifted around on Twitter. There was a big, it had already been around before that time, but it was like, don't feed the trolls. And by that, like, first of all, a troll is someone who gets in your replies or quotes your content or whatever. And they're just really like, they're kind of like nagging you, or they're trying to get a response, or they're just being rude. Basically, a troll has no other goal than to piss you off. And so not feeding the trolls is another good tactic to keep in mind as we scroll, because it's like, hey, I don't have to give these people any of my attention because I know that they don't care about my well-being. They don't care about the future that I want to build. And therefore, I don't have to engage with them and interact with them. Now, as someone, again, who's been on the internet for a long time, my screen time has been absurd and probably currently is absurd. I know that there is an emotional response to those types of comments or that type of content. And for me personally, you have to find what emotion is coming up for you behind it. For me personally, I feel grief. I feel very sad that there's someone out there with a worldview like this. And sometimes trolls don't even have that worldview. Sometimes they're just trying to be opposite of your worldview because they like getting people angry. Now, I won't get into who does rage bait, what, or, and why. I'm just saying that type of content does well, and therefore people are incentivized to produce it and to engage with it. Alrighty. And how does all of this impact our bodies? So we've talked about the hormones, but just to reiterate, they are released, and this impacts, it can impact our heart rate, our blood pressure, our digestion, and other bodily functions. It can disrupt our sleep, and thus our mood is influenced. So it's like content, hormones, mood, and this kind of leads a lot of folks to be like, whoa, I just got anxious and I don't know why. Because again, scrolling is such a small like act that it's really dizzying to to think it can affect us that much. And another thing that came up was, I'll get into the context later. No, it's here. Okay, sorry. Another thing that came up is it impacts our bodies too, because the context of social media matters. So let's say you see a really activating headline and you like feel some like activating hormones release, right? Your heart rate might increase. Okay. The next one is a puppy video. Okay, yay, dopamine. The next one is the most horrific scenes from across the globe that you've ever seen. Okay, the next one is an ad for a hair care product. Okay, the next one is, you know what I mean? So we're going back and forth constantly. And if we're going back and forth like this instead of like this, I guess if you can't see the video, it's a large distance versus a short distance. So if we're going back and forth at a large distance, that's a lot for our bodies. It's a lot for our bodies to go from cortisol to dopamine to cortisol to dopamine. And it's still this like activated state. And if our bodies are used to this activated state, again, we want, like, it's normal, I guess, for us then. And we're kind of itching for it. So the overwhelm isn't just happening because you're reading bad headlines. It's also because we are quickly consuming tons of information at one time, often without ample time for us to fully process and integrate the information. I'll say that last part again. We are quickly consuming tons of information at one time, often without ample time for us to fully process and integrate the information. And at one point in my social media journey, I would do intentional social media time, which sounds like polar opposites. It sounds like it's not a thing. But what I would do is I would set a timer for like 5 to 10 minutes, and I would scroll through and I would try to process as much as possible each headline. If nothing else, I would name the feeling word that came across. And I don't mean just the headlines, right? I mean the post in general. And so I would name like, oh, this makes me feel grief. Oh, this makes me feel scared. Oh, this makes me feel angry. Whatever it was coming up for me, and I would consume every detail of that post before I let myself scroll on to the next one. And what this practice does is it gets us to, one, slow down, two, process the information more fully, and three, it's giving us more information about our social media patterns. So it's telling, like when we do this intentional scrolling time, we learn, okay, this type of content gives me this type of reaction. Now in the future when I'm scrolling, I can either avoid that type of content or gravitate towards that type of content because of the state that I'm currently in and the state that I want to be in. Which is just a way to remind us that there is some semblance of control, even though sometimes scrolling can feel like out of control. I mean, I've had moments of doom scrolling where my body does not feel like it's in control. My brain does not feel like it's in control. And I am just asking like the algorithm gods for, you know, one more cat video or one more funny video or one more headline that makes me feel hopeful, whatever it is. But to wrap up this point, you know, not every single post is politically aligned or made to benefit you. And it can be a lot for our hormones to go back and forth so quickly and to watch an ad after seeing something really horrific. It's dizzying. It's dizzying to us. And we don't have time to act on and process everything we're able to see, even in 5 minutes of scrolling. Right? If we're not doing intentional scrolling and we're on our phones for just like 5 minutes or while we're waiting around for something, chances are we're not really integrating that information and processing it. And by that, I just mean like, okay, what happened? How does it make me feel? What can I do? Who do I know that I can talk to about this? Just that kind of, what does this make me feel about the world around me? Do I feel safe? How can I get to feel safe? Just a lot can come up. A lot can come up when we're online. And again, it feels like, oh, it's not that much. It's just one finger scrolling, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And so everything I've said on this slide, it all combines. And if we've been scrolling a lot, it often gets us to a place where we ask, what am I even supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? And it's true, some of the things we see are out of our control. But as has been said about this current political moment, the overwhelm is the point. And social media exists in this moment. And if social media was already overwhelming, then the political overwhelm that we're currently feeling is going to be present on social media as well. And so it is very easy to see these major events that are definitely outside of our personal control, or to see these heroic feats that, you know, oh, that person's doing so much, I could never do that. So it's very, very easy to see the bigger, the bolder, the better, and then look at ourselves and be like, how do I fit into this? Yeah, and it is a question that wants an answer. It is. We want to be helpful. We want to take action. We want to make a better world. But it's also expressing overwhelm, despair, depression, sadness, fear. And in a way, it's expressing, I'm stuck. I'm frozen. And I don't want to say like, your nervous system is activated, because not everyone is at that state, right? Not everyone is in fight, flight, fawn, or freeze mode. But I think the concept of freeze is helpful in this moment because that's what's being felt in these moments. What's being felt is wholly expletive. There's so much negative. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. And again, that's part of the point. But if we're frozen, it's hard for us to take the actions that we want to take. Even if we saw helpful actions on social media, it's when we're in that state, we got to get out of that state. And before we get into getting out of that state, I just wanted to reiterate this point. It's easier to get out of a frozen-like state when we are aware we are beginning to freeze or get cold, or whatever metaphor works for you and your body and your hormones and your nervous system. If we're not there yet in our awareness, we can focus on increasing that awareness of our emotional and physical states while we scroll. So in this presentation, I'm covering a lot, and so I didn't have enough space to start this awareness, but I can have another iteration of this and we can go through that. But basically, intentional scrolling is one option for that. Kind of like you can make a thought, an emotional reaction log to things, but just increasing our awareness about what we're feeling when we are online. All right. And so what do we do when we're frozen? We thaw. Think about what helps you thaw. These are my ideas. They're just starting points. Yeah. So you can journal your fears or make art about your fears and your politics. These are great because they get our brains thinking about things in different ways. Or journaling our fears, we are naming them. We're getting in touch with them. So it's what's behind what am I supposed to do? It's all the feelings that led up to, like, what am I even supposed to do? And sometimes naming it is a good place to start. It builds awareness, and it gets our brains processing things. It does. The second point, we can engage our nervous systems. We can tap, we can hum, we can sing, we can dance. I like putting an ice pack on my chest or my face. Whatever nervous system engagement tools that you have, you can use them when you find yourself asking, like, what am I supposed to do? You can talk to a friend. I prefer calling my friends. One, because like FaceTiming them too, because yes, you can watch videos and you can feel a bit of a connection to the people on the screen, but the people on the screen are not reacting to your facial reaction. And so it can be very validating to call up a friend and just share in the feelings of the moment. And maybe your friend is doing something really cool and helpful in their daily life, and that helps inspire you, or they know resources that you don't know about, or they saw a piece of news that was hopeful and helpful. And if you don't have a lot of friends offline that can provide you with this type of company and connection, I suggest first, safety first, but you can comment or message creators that have positively impacted your online political experience, and you can let them know. I, again, been online for a long time and have had many interactions online, and they make me feel less alone, even if it's just in the comments. It keeps me buoyed. Yeah. You can research and reach out to an organization. So this might look like, okay, I screenshot this like call to action. Now I'm going to put it in my calendar and I'm going to journal about what it'll feel like to make this change, especially if it's a long-term routine change. So let's say there's some meeting every other Sunday to make meals and that you put in the free fridge in your community. That's a commitment. And if it's not currently part of your routine, it might take some change work, some change talk, some change planning to get from screen to community. So you can plan this out, or oh, I want to join this organization, but I don't think I think sometimes, at least from the organizations I see online, what can happen is, oh, I don't think I have like all the theories to join them. Well, part of your plan might be reading or reading their content and blog posts or engaging in that way. And then you build your confidence on the theory side so you can do praxis. Um, that's just one, again, another way to thaw is when we realize we are in this overwhelm, we can stop, we can get off, and we can remind ourselves of the things that we can control. And we can either control those things in the moment, or we can plan for long-term change. And this last suggestion is to create an infographic to help yourself and others to process and make change. And I love this one because it involves a lot of different steps, right? So you have to learn the information, you have to strip it down to its most, well, you don't have to, you can have any process you want, but this is typically how it goes for me. You learn the information, you strip it down to its most vital components, and then you rearrange it in a way that is, helpful and hopeful. At least that's the approach that I take. And I do say help yourself because a lot of my own content starts with, whoa, this moment is very overwhelming. What do I need to get through it? What do I need to tell myself? How do I need to look at this? What perspective do I need to take? And then you get infographics. And you're providing a service. You are adding to the conversation. Yeah. And so finally, to be effective in your thawing, you can make a list or a plan to thaw and stick it where you'll see it. So that could be, okay, every morning when I sit down for breakfast, I get into this scrolling loop and I can't get out of it. So I'm going to jot down this plan on a sticky note and put it on the table where I eat breakfast. So that way I see it and I can more easily access it. Or you can make it one of your phone's backgrounds. So that way you can close out of the apps and like, oh, there's my plan right there. And it can be helpful too to give like warning signs that you need to thaw. And just make your plan accessible to you and put it in a place that makes sense for your current social media patterns. It's all about meeting your current needs of staying informed and using social media as a tool for you. I'm talking a lot, y'all. Okie dokie. And this question is just a reminder to ground you back into your plan. How and when do we get to spend time processing our emotions that come up while we're scrolling? When do we have time for that? When do we get to do that? When should we make time for that? When can I make time for that? At what point of the day do I feel really overwhelmed and I just get, and then incorporating this plan in those moments. Either you plan it ahead or you're like, oh, wait, I remember Chuck said that. And so now I'm gonna try it out. And this tweet, I'll just read it out. It can be overwhelming to witness, experience, take in all the injustices of the moment. The good news is that they're all connected. So if your little corner of work involves pulling at one of the threads, you're helping to unravel the whole damn cloth. And I think this tweet is just so important. I think about it a lot. I do think about it a lot because, again, our actions can feel small when the problems are so big. But I think, personally, I think the solutions are little by little, daily actions, working on our inner world so that way we can live out those values in our outer world. And I like this tweet too, because it's an example of content that helps ground me, right? It's informative. It's saying, hey, everything is connected, and it's inspirational. It's reminding me that we're also all connected. And my little corner of work is doing something even when I can't see what it's doing. We can have huge impacts online. Like I said, I've been offline for so long. And I guess I'll just share that I've been very intentional about my political content online for a long time now. And I had a friend from high school who was on the right hand side of things. And he told me a while ago that just what I would share eventually kind of helped him nudge himself toward the left. And I'm not saying that's going to happen every time. And I'm not saying it has to be done online. I'm just saying there are outcomes and consequences that are good that we can't always see. And if he didn't tell me about that, I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known. I'm just a girl yapping on the internet. I would not have known. All right. Ooh, so nudging our algorithm. What does that mean? So the algorithm responds to your patterns. Whatever pattern that keeps you engaged online, the algorithm is tracking that and it's giving it back to you pretty much every time you open the apps. Again, I haven't like looked at what the algorithm is doing in this specific point in time, because sometimes they're like, we are really pushing like if you bookmark something or whatever it is. So I don't know that specifically, but I do know it's tracking like every movement online. And so we do have a little bit of control. If we are aware that our actions, that this little action, if we're aware that that little action is being tracked, we can bring different actions to that moment, right? So if we see a post that makes us feel hopeful and gets us excited to do this work, or just like gives us a path forward, or reminds us like there's good people out there doing good work and I can join them, hit all the buttons on that post, share it, screenshot it, put it in a bookmark, comment on it, whatever it is. And part of another like practice too could be making a folder of content that's good and political and informative, but that you don't have time for, and then scheduling a time to go back and sit with it. Or it could be part of your thawing plan, right? If you have this bookmark folder and you feel frozen, you can go to that specific bookmark folder and you can review content that is helpful to you. And you don't have to change up the content constantly. It can be a few grounding, inspirational posts. I don't know about y'all, but there were no such thing as like iPad babies when I was a baby. And so there were certain like family homes I would go to and I would read the same book. So getting the same information over and over and over and over and over and over again is not the worst thing. As a matter of fact, in very recent history, we used to consume the same content multiple times because we didn't have unending access to entertainment and information. Another way to nudge your algorithm is you can search, if you see a post that makes you feel hopeful and helpful, you can search the comments and you can interact and engage in the comments, and you can find similarly hopeful content creators. So if a content creator is doing like social media work, and by that I mean, okay, I'll confess, I know that people go to the comments, and so if I'm looking to expand my reach and expand my audience, I will comment on other therapist posts or other political posts that I agree with, because I want people to see my name, and people will click on that creator, and you can be one of those people that clicks on creators like, oh, that comment was insightful and added on to the conversation and made me feel positive and hopeful, again, inspired to take action. And then you can follow those creators because they are intentionally in the comments doing that. So that's how you can source some of these creators. You can also share them to your story, and maybe you have friends and family or followers that can give you similar content, or it can spark the conversation, stuff like that. Another way to nudge our algorithm is we can scroll quickly past content that we don't want to see. Whatever it is, like I said earlier, I don't even get the AI videos anymore because I have always been like, oh, go away. That's just not what I want to do. You have that power, and I have seen the cause and effect. Again, it's not something that you'll see right away, and it can be hard to understand that there's going to be like a resolution to this action, right? Like, okay, what is scrolling quickly past the algorithm going to do? You might not be able to consciously know that your algorithm has changed, but it is changing, it is shifting. You can also not read the comments on posts you know will set you off. You don't have to engage. You don't have to start the online argument with people you don't know. Now, sometimes you might want to. Sometimes you're like, I have it in me, or sometimes you're like, I want a burst of adrenaline or dopamine or whatever it is. So just check in with yourself first is basically what I'm saying. And another thing, there have been weeks, especially right after election results, where I said, I'm training my algorithm. I'm training my algorithm this week. I'm not letting anything slip through that does not serve my political and emotional needs right now. And it's a different way of being online. It's less, I don't want to say mindless scrolling, but it's a form of intentional scrolling where the goal is to get your algorithm where you want it to go. So for instance, this might not be something that you can really see, but when TikTok went down and then it came back and everyone was like, whoa, my algorithm is different. My algorithm wasn't that different because I have trained that thing to be what I need it to be. I don't put up with any nonsense on any app about the type of content I do and do not want to see. Now, this might be something that takes a few steps. Because of being in social media, I knew different tactics and different types of content. And so I could spot content that wasn't going to be good for me immediately. And so my algorithm shifted pretty quickly because I just had that social media muscle from the work I've been doing for over a decade. So if it takes you time, don't worry about it. Stick with it. One thing I didn't get to hit home too hard in the live version was like, know your motivation behind this like changed relationship with social media, and it will carry you through. For instance, like training your algorithm is not fun. And the reason I was so adamant about it was because I was like, look, I have to be on here for work anyway. And so I'm going to make it an experience that I want it to be. And that kept me motivated. All right. And you can also search hashtags of topics that you're interested in. That just spending time on content that you want to see will give you more content that you want to see. I know we know that, but you can make an effort and make a plan to nudge your algorithm. And I do say nudge because it takes time. Sharing. Okay. So let's see. So this was the question I got that someone just wanted to know in order to like replace the sharing. I asked for questions, and it was, what's the difference between being informed and doom scrolling? And since the algorithm is unique and individualized to us and our patterns, the answer to the question is similar to that. So I would say doom scrolling happens when we feel frozen when we feel locked into that cycle and we can't seem to get off, I would say that's where we start to doom scroll. There was a Blue Sky post, and it was like, maybe if I see just one more post, I'll be more pissed off or something. And it was playing on the fact of like, I know staying on here is going to rile me up more and more, and I won't be able to get off, but I can't get offline. And so I think being informed, one, you are able to use that information. I think that's the line between it, is being informed means at some point in the week or in the month, I can either put my phone down, or if your phone and social media is the most accessible space for you, you can share something that is adding to the conversation. You are doing, you are creating, you are adding, you are volunteering, you are doing mutual aid. When we doom scroll, I don't know if we're doing that. We might be reposting mutual aid, and that's helpful. But are we in contact with our community? Are we aware of our needs? Are we aware of our skills and our strengths? Are we aware of our access to resources while we're online? Are we able to take in the information and build a plan and act on it? Or are we just taking in more and more information like it's a fire hose? I hope that kind of answers the question. Again, it's a little tricky in this space because it is so individual, and like our algorithms are so individual, and also our ability to kick in these new habits also relies on our current understanding of social media and our current understanding of our own emotional state and our current ability to make our communities safer and better, and whatever that means. And I guess this is a good time to go over that too. So there is something, which of course I didn't pull up ahead of time, although I did in the live version. But anyway, there is something called the multitasking. There's something called the social change ecosystem by Deepa Iyer, DEEPA space IYER. No, I'm not reading it. I haven't pulled it up yet. But what this does, the social change ecosystem, it breaks down social change into different jobs, basically different niches, different skills, different access to resources, and it reminds us of our lane. It reminds us of what we're good at. It reminds us of what knowledge and skills and desires that we have, that, let's see, stop sharing. And it can ground us back into what we can do. And again, it's because this type of long-term work, we might not always see the results. Or the most accessible, there we go. The most accessible idea of change is often the superhero story. I believe it was, oh goodness. There's a sociologist, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but he has a really good article about how the superhero myth stops our social change. Because superheroes, right, they do all of these things, right? They solve the whole problem start to finish. But we're not superheroes. We don't have, like, superheroes aren't real. Change and social justice is every single person, a critical mass of people doing the daily work. And the daily work does not always get good engagement on social media. As a matter of fact, it really doesn't. it really doesn't get good engagement on social media because it's not sexy. It's not shareable. It doesn't create a dopamine loop and it doesn't create anger and rage and fear. It's grounding in the daily work. One of the suggested like long form, hopeful, helpful, actionable content creators, they have a blog called Chop Wood, Carry Water, which is I can't remember where it's from, but it's a saying about, oh, when you reach enlightenment, what's the difference between now and when you reach enlightenment? And both is, well, before enlightenment, I chop wood, I carry water. After enlightenment, I chop wood and I carry water because those are the daily tasks of living. But anyway, back to the social change ecosystem. This is what we're all working towards. Our little lanes will all bring us there. And so there's visionaries is people, the skills of a visionary, I believe, it's all in this workbook, but the skills of a visionary, I believe, are like, they're the ones with the dream. They're the ones that keep us on track and aligned with the imagined future, right? Because oftentimes, and this is just my perspective, the way I see it, is the whole ecosystem of overwhelm, right? Social media and just the current political tactics of overwhelm make it easier to react than to build sustainable safety nets and communities. And a visionary is someone who reminds us, hey, we don't have to use their tools. We have to keep ourselves and each other safe. That's kind of what a visionary is. A healer would be people who hold space, be like therapists, people who hold space to process the moment. Healers are folks who debrief people who have gone, like, I remember in 2020, I'm chronically ill. I did not feel safe protesting in 2020. Also, protests are bad on my knees, just stuff like that. That was not my skill. That was not my accessibility. I couldn't be there. And what I did do is I let my friends who were there, I reached out to my friends who went out and protested, and I talked to them about what they saw and how hard it was and the emotions that come up, because it's emotional to protest. And so a healer is someone who holds space for them and helps people process what's going on. Frontline responder can be the people who go to the protest, or that can, all types of things. And again, I'll include this PDF. Here we go. There's a link, so I'll include the link in however this recording gets sent out. So hopefully that framework, that social change ecosystem framework, gets us thinking about the offline work or even online work. Again, I want to stress the accessibility component of social media, because for some folks with energy limiting conditions or who are immune compromised or any type of reason that makes other forms of resistance inaccessible, totally negating the benefits of social media and how it is used to spread information it's not good. We're leaving out a whole portion of our community, and we want to include them. So keeping in mind, this is a framework I've really been using recently. What are my strengths and my skills? What is my access to resources? And what are my needs? Needs kind of give us a boundary of like, oh, okay, I can't do that. And that's okay. Someone else can. Someone else is doing that. Let's see. There was one other question that kind of came up for me and other folks about like how to apply all of this. And of course, I just forgot it while I was talking about that last point. Oh well, it'll come back or it won't. And we had a 5-minute break. If you need a 5-minute break, put me on pause, go for it. And these are questions that we used to brainstorm before we got into goals and objectives. And again, this is a long presentation, and it's covering a lot of ground. And so we kind of rushed through a little bit of this part. But if we're not, it's like therapy. If we're not doing the work outside of session, like session isn't the only time to be doing the work. So the intention of this whole shebang was to give folks tools about social media and to get us thinking about, okay, what do I need? What can I implement? Where am I at? That kind of thing. So the brainstorm questions are, what time of day does my scrolling lead to feelings of doom and despair? This can help us in our plan really make it relevant to our needs. So, you know, if we don't have, if we don't get into a despair state in the morning, then we don't need to think about changing our our social media time in the morning. Second question is, what's the tone of the content that makes me feel overwhelmed and hopeless? Notice I said tone, because tone is part of it. It could even be the graphic design of it all. I think that's another skill that I had in my time as a social media manager, to identify content quickly, identify and categorize the content quickly, because I knew what designers were using at that time to convey certain feelings. And so if you don't have that part of, like, that's not in your toolbox, then what you can do is you can do some intentional scrolling and you can reflect on the tone. Now, one point about intentional scrolling is you might end up spending more time on a post, like physically on the post, than you want to for your algorithm. However, if you need to build that skill before you can train your algorithm, then you need to build that skill before you train your algorithm. And so that's just one note about that, is it's tracking the time that you're on each post. And so just being aware of that. And third question is, which accounts or creators give me hope and inspiration? Follow them. Look at who's following them. Look at who they're following. Look at who they repost. Because the more you interact with and the more you see those types of posts, the more the algorithm is going to give you those posts. And so just going out of your way, making a list of them so you remember who they are when they come across your screen. And then the last question is, how can I make genuine connection with folks online that are safe connections? But just thinking of, like, especially in terms of accessibility, if in-person community is not as accessible and I feel alone in this, how do I use the online space to feel less alone and to make genuine connections? You can start by leaving comments, nice comments, saying, thank you for this work. That's simple. Thank you for this work. Thank you for your work. Very simple, very easy. And I think one point to that question as well, informing our plans, can also be remembering that there are people on other sides of the screen doing good work, right? It's not just that this work is happening. Someone out there has made the plan and is following through and telling you about it. Okay, lots of words. We'll wrap up soon, hopefully. But these were just ideas to start building your plan. And so on the left is the acronym for SMART goals. So SMART goals are just a way to create a goal or a plan or an objective that meets your needs and that you'll want to follow through on. And so therefore increasing your chance of following through and making that change. And so to do this, a goal needs to be specific. So for instance, just saying, I want to spend less time on social media, that's not specific. Measurable, maybe it's, I want to spend 15 minutes less on social media, or I want to go out and do one thing that gets me closer to taking long-term political actions. Something that's achievable. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, your screen time right now is 10 hours. Is it achievable to go from 10 to 0? I don't think so. So something that's achievable would be maybe cutting back 10 minutes, or maybe my goal this week is to make a bookmark folder for content that I want to learn from, but when I see it, when it comes across my page, I don't have the space for it. And your plan can go week by week. Your plan can go day by day. Your plan can go hour by hour, and it can adjust for how you're growing online and what you're learning online and how your algorithm is shifting, because it will eventually shift. And the R in SMART is relevant. So does it meet your needs? Is it something you want to do? Does it improve your life? Having that in your plan will help you follow through on that plan. And then T, time bound. That one, I feel like if you are partaking in this presentation, it's because you feel kind of an urgency to take back some control of your social media. And so this one might not feel as relevant, but it is. Instead, like maybe you're like, okay, this week is just too busy. I have too much on my plate. I can't implement this now, but I'll implement it next week. Or this is the step I'm doing this week. This week I'm gonna do 5 minutes of intentional scrolling each day. Next week, I'm gonna keep a thought journal. The week after that, I'm gonna make my bookmarks folder. Just build on who you are and what you need. All right, so I'll get through these examples after some water. Okay, so they kind of, I don't want to say that there's like easy, medium, hard, like no, but I did kind of set them up. So like, depending on where you're at with your self-awareness while you're scrolling, or your ability to like clock certain types of content, you'll see what I mean when I go over the examples. So the first example, I will be more intentional with my scrolling because I'm so activated. I don't think I can get out of it. That's not very specific, but it's relevant and it meets the needs. I don't know how I can get out of it. So I will be more intentional with my scrolling because I am so activated. I don't think I can get out of it. So I will take 30 seconds after reading a headline to check in with myself, see where I feel it in my body, and think deeply about how this headline might play out in real life. How does this affect my real life? How would this affect my life if I was in this city, if I was in this part of the world? Or I can dissect the headline closely to see what kind of narrative it is supporting. Like, what's the tone? What's the tone? What's the goal? What is the intention? And I'm not like that. Don't go down rabbit holes or anything, but like, you know, media uses passive voice sometimes. And so that can be like in their grammar structure, they use passive voice. So it's like, the grass fell over. That's passive voice. But it's like, maybe it's not passive voice. I shouldn't be giving a grammar lesson. But in reality, it's like, oh, the grass didn't fall over. Someone got their lawnmower out and chopped it off. Like, that's kind of what I'm getting at here. But one point about this first example is that if you're spending these 30 seconds and you're open, like your phone is open to the app, those 30 seconds, the algorithm is tracking in. The algorithm is saying, oh, you're spending a lot of time on this. You might want it. So if it's a negative reaction, think about screenshotting it and spending your time with it off the app. So the algorithm isn't getting any information that you don't want it to be getting. Second example, when I find myself feeling anxious from doom scrolling, one, you can, this is, oh, I feel myself starting to get worked up, okay? Or I feel myself at freeze. You have that skill in your toolbox already. When I find myself feeling anxious from doom scrolling, but I still can't seem to stop, I will pick one of the following to do. I will look through my photo app for 5 minutes. Photo app, or if you already have created that bookmark folder, go back through those things. I like Photo App because sometimes there are screenshots on there that I'm like, oh, I wanted to look into this more. Or it's just like, oh my gosh, these are the people I love, and just reminds you um, of things to be hopeful for. And I know that's not staying informed, but it gives us some space. It gives us some space to take in more information later, if that's what we want to do. Another option for this is I can scroll through a less activating platform like Tumblr or Arena. Some people also use Reddit, but then Reddit becomes a problem, and then I've been there. And so I think Tumblr and Arena, I don't know if they really have an algorithm. I shouldn't speak too confidently about that. But Arena was created by Gen Z software developers, and I'm pretty sure it's chronological in nature. And they have an Instagram where they highlight different people, users, and what they've created on there. You can still get lots of headlines. You can still get lots of information. And yeah, like one of my boards on there is called A Whole New World. And so I filled it with memes and articles and PDFs of books and photographs that remind me, like, we have some control in this world, and we can take daily actions to make a world that we want to see. And so those are just less activating platforms. They keep you informed, but they don't, the feedback loops aren't there. The rage bait isn't necessarily there. The engagement is different. The algorithm is less for advertisers. You can also read or watch long form content. We suggested about going to your library and using resources there. There's also Libby, which is your library online. And so just stuff like that. Again, you can create a bookmark folder anywhere that makes sense for you for these longer form contents that you're like, I know I want to look into that, but I just can't do it right now. Probably because our attention span is kind of in that dopamine feedback loop. All right, and the last example. Each day during my lunch break or a specific time that has scrolling that makes you feel overwhelmed and just like, what am I supposed to do? So find that time in your day. And during that time, I will do one activity that connects me back to parts of myself that I ignore while I'm scrolling on social media. So that could be meditating for 2 to 10 minutes. Now, if meditation is not currently a practice available to you, when I first started meditating, I couldn't sit for 30 seconds. It was physically painful to sit still. So if meditation is not accessible to you, maybe that's not, maybe I'm just saying it's hard to go from the agitated state of social media to building a new habit, a totally new habit. But if that is accessible to you, you can meditate. You can go for a walk around the building or block. You can spend 5 to 10 minutes in your language learning app. It's still on your phone. It's still engaging you, but it's not looping you. And it's building a skill that is helpful for the world that you want to see. You can also spend 15 minutes reading a book, comic book, poetry book, whatever it is. There are certain points in my day and my weekly routines now where, for instance, I do curbside pickup for my groceries. And instead of scrolling while I wait for them, I bring a book now. That's a good, like, what am I processing personally? This is personally me. If you're processing stuff in your car like that, great, good, awesome. I'm not acting on the information that I'm looking at in my car before my groceries come. I'm not present with it. I'm not present with myself. So I brought a book. And books give us, you can't comment on books. You can't like, you can't share. And so it gives our brain this space to problem solve that social media doesn't. And you can also close your eyes and just listen or dance to at least one song. If you want more, go for it. But this is just part of the routine. And this can be like, okay, I'm going to do these things and then I'm going to go on social media, or I'm going to be on social media for 30 minutes and then I'm going to do one of these things. Whatever you need, whatever you find that you need. And then the last one is I'm going to journal about my feelings for 15 minutes. And all of these, again, are just kind of connecting us back to parts of ourselves that might be like activated and online when we're online, but we're not paying attention to them because we're paying attention to social media. And this was about sharing goals. Obviously, we can't do that in this space, but if you find someone in your life or online that you want to work on this with, you can ask each other, like, what are some of the larger goals and smaller steps I plan on doing after this gathering? What does that look like? Do I need to take it day by day? Where do I need to start? If I do a week by week thing, what's my end goal look like? And then breaking it down from there and going backwards and restructuring it. What are some options I plan on working toward in the long run? Maybe that is finding your news elsewhere. Oh, that was the thing I was going to talk about is yeah, social media is great for information, but it's very important that we are fact checking it, or that, yeah, even sources that we like, people can slip up. And so we don't have to add to the chaos, basically. We don't have to share information immediately, especially right now. That information might change. It might not be the best information immediately. And part of why we are compelled to share things quickly is because, one, it's good for engagement. The algorithms like it. And two, if we're so anxious about the news and the most accessible action is sharing about it, then sharing about it can help relieve some anxiety of the moment. Because we're like, I told people, I did my part, I helped. Okay, well, that information isn't correct, and that's not good. And we are now engaged in the chaos that we don't want to be part of. So just being intentional about what we're consuming and what we're sharing. If you don't want to be part of that problem, choose not to be. And again, that takes some skills, that takes some time, but that you can be working toward that. And then the last question, how do you plan on staying motivated to implement these shifted social media habits? I touched on this earlier, but remembering why you're doing this, can be really helpful. It can be really helpful. I'm changing my relationship with social media because I want to join an organization. I want to volunteer for something. Remember that when you're implementing the plan. Remember that when you're building the plan, so it's actually working towards that larger goal. And remember that when it's hard, when you're like, I don't want to do this plan, keeping your why front and center can really help you. And then we're so close to wrapping up. Goals and habits will not change overnight. Just remember that as we move forward. Change is a process, little by little. That's actually one of the books I've been reading right now is by Dorothy Day. She was Catholic. So if you weren't raised Catholic, her book might be like, whoa, that's a little Catholic. But I was raised Catholic, and she's a Catholic socialist anarchist who started the Catholic Workers Union, and she wrote for she didn't start that. She started the Catholic Worker, which was a newspaper about unions, and it was anti-war. And I've been reading her book because for me that's helpful. And her whole idea and mantra of social change was little by little. And the people she worked with, their mantra was like, we want to create a world where it's easier for people to be good. And so having that book in this moment helps my social media time. And it reminds me that change is a process, that it's little by little. And yes, even changing our social media usage is a process. Yes, even nudging our algorithms is a process. It will take time. And we might not see the results immediately, or the results might look different than we thought. Those are also learning to work with that. And by that, I mean learning to work with outcomes being a little different, or not seeing outcomes as tangibly as we want. We love immediate feedback. We love instant gratification. That's part of why the social media loops work. But we're also now trying to use the muscle where we don't get immediate gratification. And that is part of the long-term political work, I think, right? Like, just as an example, like you might really want eggs. Okay, eggs aren't available. So but we have this muscle of waiting for things that we want and being a little uncomfortable in the process and not knowing what's going to come next. Those are muscles that we can build. And also keep in mind your personal motivation on this new social media habit, and that'll keep us going. And this is the last slide. From a quote from Grace Lee Boggs: "We never know how our small activities will affect us through the invisible fabric of our connectedness. In this exquisitely connected world, it's never a question of critical mass. It's all about critical connections." And so you can make critical connections online. You don't have to make them online, but remembering our interconnectedness online and offline can be motivating, can be grounding, can be inspirational, can be hopeful, can be a reality check of like, what does this work actually look like? Because sometimes social media doesn't give us the example that meets our reality. It gives us the example that it's engagement. So just keeping that in mind as things move forward. I realize now I should have ended with a slide of how to contact me. I can edit that in. Thank you so much for taking this time with me. I really appreciate you. I do think the more of us doing this type of work, maybe the better social media platforms we'll all experience. Yeah, so when my information is on the screen, just reach out if you have any questions. Bye, have a good day.